President-elect Donald Trump has tapped oil and gas industry executive Chris Wright, a staunch defender of fossil fuel use, to be his pick to lead the Department of Energy. Stick around to know more. The global leaders gather in Brazil for G20 summit. Donald Trump's return and geopolitical conflicts overshadow talks on trade, climate and Ukraine. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer says UK wants strong relationship with China as he meets Xi Jinping at G20. The group of farmers partially blocking a highway southwest of Paris has now gone home with their tractors following Emmanuel Macron's reiteration on Sunday of his opposition to the current version of the Mercosur proposal. A special tribunal in Bangladesh has today directed the investigators probing allegations against ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to complete their work within a month's time. They're also seeking extradition of Hasina from India. Sri Lankan President Anura Kumara Desanayake retained the key finance minister portfolio and reappointed Harini Amarasuriya as the Prime Minister today as the Indian Ocean island nation targets stronger recovery from a draining financial crisis. Towns in the province of Nueva Ecija were left inundated by floodwater a day after super typhoon Manyi battered northern Philippines. And even as COP29 is underway, so is the G20. Scientists around the world say the goal to keep the world's temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius is not going to happen despite the talks at Baku, Azerbaijan. Well, first and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, take a look at this. United States President Joe Biden, he has approved the deployment of Army tactical missile systems, the ATACMS, to Ukraine, allowing strikes deep within Russian territory. That does change the entire image of this war. This decision marks a shift in Washington's earlier stance, which limited Ukraine to using US weaponry within its own borders or Russian-occupied areas. The approval comes as Russia intensifies its own aggression. Take a look at some of those latest attacks in Sumy and Zaporizhzhia as well, launching a massive drone and missile attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure nonetheless. Officials have described it as the largest assault in recent months. Now, of course, the visuals on your screens about the recent attack. This is Sumy, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the ATACMS missiles, with a range of up to 300 kilometers, that's about 186 miles, are expected to target key sites in the Kursk region, where Ukrainian forces control over 1,000 square kilometers at this point in time. Reports suggest North Korean troops have been deployed here to bolster Russian forces. But the decision appears tied to defending Ukrainian advances in the Kursk region, where Kyiv launched a surprise incursion back in August. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, frustrated by previous restrictions, remarked, "Strikes are not made with words. The missiles will speak for themselves." Now, the decision does follow months of pressure from Ukraine and its allies to lift restrictions seen as limiting Kyiv's own ability to defend its cities and critical infrastructure. Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned that enabling Ukraine to strike Russian territory could be viewed as NATO's direct involvement in the war. It's been almost 1,000 days. 19th of November marks 1,000 days of the Ukraine-Russia war. Despite this, Western leaders, including United States and British officials, emphasize that Moscow's threats should not deter support for Ukraine.
President Joe Biden's administration is giving the green light to Ukraine to use U.S.-made weapons to strike deep into Russia. That's according to two U.S. officials and a source familiar with the decision. This military drill video shows the Army Tactical Missile Systems, or ATACMS, which have a range of nearly 200 miles. Sources say the rockets will likely be used in Ukraine's first long-range strikes and that those attacks could happen within days. The shift marks a significant reversal of Washington's policy in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. For months, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been pushing to allow his country's military to use U.S. weapons to hit Russian military targets far from the border.
Але удари завдають не словами.
On Sunday, he said the missiles would speak for themselves.
Ракети самі за себе скажуть.
Russia has warned it would see looser limits on U.S. weapons as a major escalation. And one Russian lawmaker warned the decision could lead to World War III, according to the TASS news agency. Sources said the change is largely in response to Russia's deployment of North Korean ground troops to supplement its own forces. Meanwhile, President-elect Donald Trump is set to take office in about 2 months. It's not clear if he'll reverse Biden's decision, but he has long criticized the scale of U.S. aid to Ukraine and has vowed to end the war quickly, without explaining how. While some U.S. officials have expressed skepticism that allowing long-range strikes will change the war's overall trajectory, the decision could help Ukraine at a moment when Russian forces are making gains, and possibly put Kyiv in a better negotiating position when, and if, ceasefire talks happen. The White House and the State Department declined to comment. A Trump spokesperson did not immediately respond to requests for one.
Well, now, joining me here on the broadcast, of course, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, a defense and geopolitical expert, and Dr. Rajan Kumar, Associate Professor of Russian Studies, SIS at the JNU. Very warm welcome to the both of you. General, coming to you first, because there's something that we need to look at why Joe Biden made this decision 2 months, when he was exiting office. Recent intelligence reports reveal the deployment of thousands of North Korean troops that we've already spoken about, up to 12,000 North Korean soldiers that are reportedly stationed over there. And this development was definitely a key topic during Joe Biden's recent discussions with leaders from Japan, South Korea, and China. Xi Jinping, they were sitting across the room with each other at the APEC summit in Peru, in Lima. Now, timing also plays a critical role. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is set to take office in January. Biden's move signals urgency. Trump has pledged a swift end to the conflict, raising concerns among Ukraine's allies about the future of U.S. support to Ukraine. Now, Donald Trump, General, let's not forget, has already hinted at pressurizing Ukraine to cede territory to Russia. How are you looking at this latest development, the ATACMS? We will definitely talk about its range and the firepower it brings and helps Ukraine with at this point in time. But the timing of this decision, do you concur with the points that I've just made?
Thank you, Kabir. I think definitely to what you've just said. Makes a lot of meaning because first and foremost, it's, the transition time. You have Biden going out and obviously he's moving out. He's not going to be standing for elections again. And Trump coming for the second time has said he's not going to be standing for elections again. And all of it that is promised Americans is his incoming as the president of America would stop war. That's what he's promised, and he's quite hopeful about it. Having said that, the incidents now that are occurring, some people would say it's adding fuel to fire, but let's put it in the correct perspective. I personally feel that, the use of these ATMs, that is the Army tactical missiles, as also the HIMARS, were being seen in February and June of this year itself. In July, the Russians had captured one of it primarily to see what it is about, and the reverse engineering to prevent its own, vulnerable points and areas, so that should this 300-kilometer range missile should not totally, the Russians shouldn't be taken by surprise. Having said that, what is it that makes it different? Because obviously you find that the Turks also are involving themselves. Erdogan is saying that, let's freeze where the conflict is. Freeze means the Russians lose Kursk and obviously giving almost 20% of the Ukrainian territory to the Russians. Trump himself has been saying freeze, though not directly, but meaning let's, wherever you are, come on now, hold on, we will now negotiate, diplomacy, talks, whatever it is. But Ukrainians obviously are not going to accept this. Neither are the Russians going to accept when they have over 1,000 square kilometers of their land under the Ukrainians. Now, in this particular context, the timing now, just 2 months are left. How much can it be done? Well, all kinds of statements emanating from Russia that, all these reactions of theirs are also from the press. But, well, the American president has given a go-ahead. But I don't think Ukrainians will attempt to do that openly, though they're doing it right now. It isn't that their supply points and the supply, the logistic bases are not being attacked by the Ukrainians. They are being done. The Russians have also attacked the energy sector and the energy complete thing of Ukraine being destroyed. I mean, now this is the time. If Trump is going to be coming, and if Trump wants the war to end, then let's grab as much as we can. Let's make an impact as much as we can. If the Ukrainian morale can be raised, if the Ukrainians can make from 1,000 square kilometers, say, to 2,000 square kilometers, obviously the bargaining increases. The Russians will be thinking this is the right time. That is why you found so many drones. That's why you found Zelensky also complaining that why is the German chancellor talking to the Russians? The Russians intact. But at the same time, the Germans have given 4,000 drones that are 4 times more dangerous than the kamikaze drones that the Ukrainians have. So there's a lot which is going on at this point of time. The Europeans know fully well that the gas is going to be a problem. The Austrians think that, well, if the Russian gas doesn't come, they're going to be heading for trouble. So Europe can't carry on with this. And there is some hope somewhere that Trump coming in, there might just be the end to the Ukrainian conflict. Now, how that end would come, would it be for satisfaction of both? Obviously, the Ukrainians will never be satisfied, and the Russians are not going to give up the eastern front. In that context, I think this is where the bargaining, this is where it's happening. If you can try, but the Americans have, to a large extent, almost invested $1 trillion in this particular war, and much that they have not gained anything. The Trump again,
right
when
on.
he comes back, he's going to insist on 2%
No,
of
General,
the GDP.
you have made a pertinent point over there, because winter is right around the corner. Everybody needs that gas to keep themselves warm. And I'm telling you, 1,000 days of this war, that figure of 1,000 days is looming large on the head. We've seen Zelensky go to various radio shows also and say that maybe under Donald Trump, the issue is going to be resolved much sooner. But Donald Trump has already hinted at ceding territory to Russia. How will that play out? Let's wait and find out. Also with us on the broadcast, Dr. Rajan Kumar, Associate Professor of Russian Studies, SIS at the JNU. You know what, Professor? I quickly wanted to understand how this is going to alter global perceptions of what United States' stand for Ukraine has been all this while, how United States is balancing its support for Ukraine and, of course, NATO, and the change of guard with Donald Trump now making his way back in. And before you answer that, you know what, Professor? Let's quickly listen in to the Lithuanian Foreign Minister and, of course, European Union's Foreign Minister Joseph Borrell about how they're looking at Joe Biden's sudden decision. Take a listen. We'll come back for more.
That we and Ukrainians have been asking for a very long time, in even broader sense, that all the restrictions have to be removed. Why I'm not, opening a champagne just yet is probably because we don't know the actual numbers of how many rockets Ukrainians do have. So the question is, are they provided enough rockets that would make a difference in the battlefield? Because we're not fighting a battle in the press, we're fighting a battle actually in Ukraine. And this is why we need to win. So good arguments in the press release, it's very important, but we need to win there.
I've been saying once and again that Ukraine should be able to use the arm we provided to them in order to not only to stop the arrow, but also to be able to hit the Arcus. I continue believing this is what has to be done. I'm sure it will be discussed once again. I hope member states will agree on that. And if not, anyone will do whatever they believe is according with the need to support Ukraine.
Well, Dr. Kumar, you heard the man. Joseph Borrell, of course, signaling support, following in the footsteps of Joe Biden. Lithuanian foreign minister says, we're not opening the champagne just yet because we don't know how many missiles, the ATACMS missiles, Ukraine has with them. But is it a champagne opening event at all in the first place to begin with? From your point of view, how is geopolitics shaping up around this new move?
I think, this is not the time that, that European countries should not be celebrating, because this will not change the outcome of the war at all, in my view. First, let me tell you that what is the context and why did there was a reversal of policy decision from Biden administration. I think the first reason was there was a fear that this 10,000 Korean troops reaching Kursk region, and that might change the conflict there. Because Russia might have the upper hand, and that will change. That will push the Ukrainian back to the to Ukraine. So that was number one. The fear was also that North Korea probably increased the number of troops, and if some of the reports are to be believed, then the reports that it might go up to 1 lakh troops in the North Korean troops coming to Russia. So basically, Biden administration is trying to send a message to North Korea that your troops will become target if you send more troops in the Kursk region. So that is number one. The second, as you rightly pointed out in your program, that because Biden administration believes that when Trump comes to power after 2 months, he is going to completely change the policy of United States towards Ukraine, and he'll push for negotiations. And when negotiations start, Ukraine would be in a much stronger position if it can retain the Kursk region. And as Korean troops are approaching that Kursk region, there is a fear that Ukrainian troops may not retain the Kursk region. So the idea here from the Biden administration's perspective is that if Ukrainians can retain the territory, and if then negotiation starts, so then there'll be a bargaining that, okay, so Ukrainian armies will withdraw from the Kursk region, and you also, Russian army should also withdraw from some of the regions of Ukraine. So I think that is the key reason why this timing is important, because Americans are smart. They know that they cannot change the outcome of the war. They know that Ukrainians are losing. They also know that with just the ATACMS, what you mentioned, with 300 miles more, they cannot change the course of the war at all. But they are doing it for strategic reasons. Yes, they want to show their commitment to NATO, but they also know that Trump is going to completely change the policy towards NATO. So for the time being, it's a kind of breathing space which is being provided to Ukraine. Ukraine was.
I think this is a smart move at the hands of Joe Biden vis-a-vis Ukraine and the other NATO nations?
Definitely, this is the last-ditch effort by the Biden administration. Biden, as you know, has already become a lame duck president at the moment. He's waiting for his, to move out of the White House.
Well, I'll tell you what, Professor, he's enjoying himself. A tour in the Amazon forest. He was in Lima in Peru just a couple of days back. Right now in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro at the G20 summit.
Yeah,
got some latest visuals sitting right next to Joe Biden, Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well. But you know what, Professor? I'm going to have to slip into a quick commercial break. We're going to come back to your arguments over there. We must understand how Moscow's reacted to Biden's decision as well. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has said that the Biden administration is escalating the Ukrainian war. Listen in to what Peskov had to say. We're going to slip into a quick commercial break here and come back for more.
Мы, конечно же, обратили внимание на публикации соответствующие, где без ссылок на какие-то официальные источники, но содержится упомянутая вами информация. И здесь позиция нашего президента, позиция российской стороны была предельно четко и недвусмысленно.
The next Indian icons, beating everyone on the globe. A new perspective awaits. B6E and XEV9E. Mahindra's electric origin SUVs. Catch them at Unlimit India.
I'm Manoj Mitta, a journalist who co-authored a book titled When a Tree Shook Delhi. I've written extensively on the cover-up of political complicity in the mass violence targeting Sikhs in the wake of Indira Gandhi's assassination. Despite the official death toll of 2,733 in Delhi alone, the cover-up involved multiple arms of the Indian state. It is no surprise, therefore, that Jagdish Tytler, one of the Congress leaders alleged to be behind the violence, is said to be tried only now.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
United States' President Joe Biden's nod and authorization of the use of ATACMS deep inside the Russian territory has certainly changed the game in this Ukraine-Russia war. While the exact number of ATACMS being supplied remains undisclosed, analysts believe their deployment will force Russia to reposition military assets deep into its own territory. Western intelligence suggests hundreds of Russian targets now fall within the ATACMS range. Joining me on the broadcast is Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, geopolitical expert. He continues to be with us. A very warm welcome to you, sir. General, first and foremost, the tactical advantage of ATACMS as well. Many people, our guest on the panel as well, and several other reactions that we've been listening to say that it's not going to change the game completely. But many are also suggesting that it could push Russia to reposition its own stockpiles. Do you see that happening?
See, what happens is all the logistical bases, the complete supply chains are always within the battle zone. So 300 kilometers is a big, huge range. That does make a lot of difference. It does put Russians on the back foot. There is no denying the fact on that issue. But the Ukrainians have been using it. It isn't that they have not been using it. Each one of it costs between $1.7 million. One of the missile costs $1.7 million. That is why, well, how many have been supplied? Secondly, it's more of a psychological warfare which is going on at this point of time. You find Zelensky is going and meeting troops in the Donetsk region, just 5 kilometers away from where they are with the Russians, maybe about 5 kilometers. You find Putin going and meeting the Zaporizhia governor over there just to boost their morale, to find out what's going on on the eastern front. This is all sort of psychological warfare. Obviously, each one attempting to show. Before they know fully well, Zelensky has openly said that from Jan, the things are not going to be what he is expecting it to be. And in that context, Putin wants to be on the front foot, which he is right now, and he doesn't want to lose any more area. Obviously, you give Zelensky the ability to do what he wants to do in the next 2 months that Biden is in power. European Union is on the back foot. They know the gas is not going to be coming. The entire energy sector of Ukraine is being hit, so they are going to freeze in winters. Austria is going to freeze in winters. The Germans are finding it difficult, much that for the last about 1,000 days they've been able to do so. They're not very sure how it would be. Everybody is looking for the Ukrainian front to ease off in Jan. In that context, I feel the Ukrainians want as much as they can, and rightly so. The Kursk region is from 1,000, wherein about 50,000 troops are being deployed by the Russians to recapture that 1,000 square kilometers they have lost, in which it is stated that 12,000 are the North Korean troops. What does that indicate? That Russians also do not have those many boots on ground. The Ukrainians may have lost over a lack of troops. The Russians have also lost thousands and thousands of troops. It isn't that they both said they have lost, but in this context, if 12,000 are going to be part of the 50,000 to regain the territory in the Kursk is an indication that the Russians also feel, well, it's now or never. It's a do or die situation. Should Trump, who was promising to end it by diplomacy.
No, you're right.
That
You're right.
comes
And
through,
you know
then
what,
why
General?
not?
You can see both these opinions on both the sides of the divide. You've got Kyiv residents welcoming Joe Biden's decision. They say it came late, and residents of Moscow are saying it's a very questionable step. Of course, raising anxiety and anger in Moscow at the Biden missile decision. You know what, Professor Kumar, before I come to you, it's about the people on the ground now, isn't it? Listen in to how Ukrainians and how Russians are now looking at this big move, and I'll come back to you for more.
Щепетильный вопрос, очень сомнительное решение.
А почему?
Потому что это угрожает жизни другим людям, которые живут и, соответственно, будут использовать.
Которые руководят этими ракетами, тоже все это самое. И тем же базы американские стоят вокруг НАТО, тоже надо ударить, да, в обратку, как сказал.
Дуже часто це не так. Насправді, як превентивна дія проти Трампа можливо, у нього залишилося менше 2 місяців, він хрома качка в цьому плані, намагається зробити все, що його...
Ну, для мене це позитивне, бо від початку війни Україна має боронитися, а треба також другу сторону, хіба атакувати також. І не боятися, бо то завжди шантаж ядерної зброї з боку Росії. Як Росія буде заатакована, вона ядерну зброю буде користуватися. Але це шантаж, який вони тримають тим шантажем 3 роки вже цілий світ. І треба це закінчити, треба відважно якісь рішення дати. Мені подобається. Це рішення конкретне, власне, не тільки чекати, боятися, піддаватися, але я чув, що інші країни також дозволяють.
Well, it's a difference of opinion on both sides. Dr. Kumar, how are you looking at both these reactions? I know you earlier heard Dmitry Peskov also. Do you see this war escalating further, or like Donald Trump says it, he's going to end it in a jiffy? What do you think is going to happen?
I think it's certainly an escalation, and but it's a limited escalation in the sense that, as as it was pointed out by the previous speaker, and that and this ATACMS was already being used. It was used within the territory of Ukraine. So now it is saying that it can be used from Ukrainian territory inside Russia. This will not, as I said, that this will not change the outcome of the war at all. But this is clearly an escalation, and the Russians have already, the stockpiles that you're talking about. So they have removed the stockpile from the range of ATACMS, which is roughly 300 kilometers. So Russia has gone on defensive. It has gone on back foot in that area, and now from the Russian perspective, the crisis would be in the Kursk region, because if they send the North Korean troops, and if there is a lot of casualty of North Korean, so that will create panic in Russia as well as in North Korea. North Korea might also be cautious and careful when it decides to send the troops in the next phase, where it was planning to send some more troops. So I think that will create some problem for Russia. But again, as you say, that this is a war of retaliation in which Russia is going to again target different sectors in Ukraine, focusing primarily on power and infrastructure, but also some other areas in Ukraine. So it will certainly lead to more escalation. At this point, I think both the countries know that some kind of ceasefire or negotiation will start within a few weeks. So the idea, both the countries are trying to hold the position as much as they can, and Russian army is not going to withdraw, and Ukrainian army would also like to hold the territory before some kind of negotiation starts. As you know, that Trump has already said that this Trump in his message to Putin, when there was some conversation, as it was reported in the media, although Kremlin denied, but I think some kind of talks did take place between the two sides. Trump sent a very clear message to Putin, and he said that he should not escalate the war. And he might also have said that some kind of ceasefire will begin, the negotiation will begin as soon as he comes to power. So Russia would like to hold the position and wait for the ceasefire, wait for the negotiation, because Russia knows that Trump does not have any respect for Zelensky. He has already said that Zelensky is a kind of comedian. Zelensky is the person who is responsible, etc. He also thinks that Zelensky has links with the Biden's son, and some kind of deep state of Washington is operating with Zelensky. So, in that context, the mutual trust between Trump administration and Zelensky would be very low.
I'll tell you what, when Donald Trump flew to Washington for that final event in the Oval Office as a traditional meeting between the outgoing president and the incoming one. It seemed quite cordial on that front. We'll have to wait until the dust settles in January when Donald Trump, takes the helm of affairs. But pertinent points by both the gentlemen over there, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni and of course Professor Rajan. Always a pleasure to speak with you. Many thanks for joining with us and helping us out with your insightful inputs. How much time does Zelensky actually have to use these ATACMS missiles is going to be the biggest questions at this point in time. But this war, even as Ukraine enters its 1000th day, a significant technological arms race is also underway in Ukraine. Of course, fueled by the battlefield realities that both the panelists were just now talking about. And this is how the war has fueled a technological arms race. Take a look. Ukrainian companies like Unwave, which produces anti-drone signal jammers, have seen a surge in demand since the failed counteroffensive of 2023. The counteroffensive setbacks attributed to Russian landmines, superior troop numbers, and the use of unmanned aerial vehicles have driven this particular shift. The US has now allowed Ukraine to use American-made weapons to strike deep into Russian territory. In response, Ukraine's defense industry has rapidly expanded, with over 800 companies now operating, mostly founded after the Russian invasion. And this includes around 30 manufacturers of electronic warfare systems such as jammers designed to combat the growing threat of drones. And since 2022, drones have become a dominant force on the battlefield, both in the air and on the ground. Ukraine and Russia are on track to produce around 1.5 million drones this year, with many being small, low-cost devices used to identify and attack targets. This surge in drone activity has spurred the growth of a new industry focused on counter-drone technology, as companies like Unwave work to disrupt enemy signals and, protect their own forces. Civilian entrepreneurs, motivated by patriotism, have joined the defense sector from various fields, including IT and agriculture, with some even from politics. But even as we're talking about the Ukraine-Russia war, must throw some light on what's happening on the western sector, the West Asian sector front. An Israeli airstrike in central Beirut's Mar Elia street, on Sunday night, sparked massive fires, killing 2 people and injuring 9 others, according to Lebanon's health ministry. The strike targeted a vehicle, with flames spreading to nearby buildings as Lebanese firefighters worked to control down the blaze. Crowds gathered at the scene amid heightened tensions. Israel's intensified military campaign in Lebanon has killed over 3,800 people and injured nearly 15,000 in the past year. This escalation includes heavy bombings and ground incursions, further destabilizing the region. Meanwhile, Hezbollah's media relations chief, Mohammad Afif, was killed in an Israeli strike on a building in the densely populated district of Ras al-Naba. This is in Beirut in Lebanon. Now, diggers immediately arrived on the scene to remove the rubble of the destroyed building, and the Lebanese health ministry said the strike killed 1 person and injured 3 others. The news of Afif's death came from 2 Lebanese security sources. There was no immediate confirmation from Hezbollah. There was no evacuation order for the area published on the Israeli military spokesperson's account on social media platform X before the strike, like they usually do. And the strike hit the Ras al-Naba neighborhood, where many people displaced from Beirut's southern suburbs by the Israeli bombardment had been seeking refuge. The security forces said it struck a building where the offices of the Ba'ath party are located, and the head of the party in Lebanon, Ali Hijazi, told Lebanese broadcaster Al Jadid that Afif was in fact inside the building. Now, the broadcaster later also confirmed that Afif had in fact been killed. It showed footage of a building whose upper floors had collapsed onto the first story, with civil defense workers right there at the scene. Afif was a long-time media advisor to Hezbollah's former Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah. Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, met with Iran's ambassador to Lebanon, Mojtaba Amani, right here on Sunday. The two discussed ongoing issues surrounded by government officials. Back in September, Amani was injured in a Hezbollah explosion in Lebanon, and Iran recently affirmed its support for Lebanon's decisions in ceasefire talks amid the Israel-Hezbollah conflict. Well, time for us to slip into a quick commercial breather. On the other side, how the Republican administration is shaping up, and of course, our climate change commitments. Don't go anywhere.
The next Indian icons, beating everyone on the globe. Prepare for breathtaking performance. B6E and XEV9E. Mahindra's electric origin SUVs. Catch them at Unlimit India.
India spends $75 billion on foreign cargo vessels.
$71 billion per annum. That's a lot of money.
Imagine a situation where 95% of our cargo is coming on ships which are not owned by us. If we are still not prepared, if someone were to say that we are not going to give you ships, then we'll be stuck. So the entire nation's economy is at risk.
We are very clear that shipping is also strategic, because without that you can't really be the third largest economy in the world.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. In a significant meeting on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, that's the APEC summit in Lima, Peru, US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping held their final dance talks to discuss a range of issues including cybercrime, trade, Taiwan, the South China Sea, North Korea, and of course Russia. Xi Jinping emphasized the importance of a stable US-China relationship, calling it crucial not only for the two countries, but for the future and destiny of humanity.
中方愿同美国政府继续保持对话，拓展合作，管控分歧，努力实现中美关系平稳过渡，造福两国人民。中美关系虽然历经跌宕起伏，但在我们两人领航把舵下，也开展了卓有成效的对话和合作。 总体实现了稳定。中美关系的发展历程，也印证了中美建交45年来的经验和启示。如果两国做伙伴、做朋友，求同存异，彼此成就，中美关系就能得到长足发展。 如果把对方当作对手、敌人，恶性竞争，相互伤害，中美关系就会遭遇波折，甚至倒退。
Sitting on the other side, the outgoing US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping also agreed that the decision on the use of nuclear weapons shall be made by humans and not artificial intelligence.
I think I once had to count up the number of hours you and I spent alone together. I remember being on the Tibetan Plateau with you, and I remember being in Beijing, I remember all over the world. And both as first as vice president, then as president. We haven't always agreed, but our conversations have always been candid and always been frank. We have never kidded one another. We've been level with one another. I think that's vital. These conversations prevent miscalculations, and they ensure the competition between our two countries will not veer into conflict. Be competition, not conflict. That's our responsibility to our people, and as you indicated, to the people around the world. We are the most important alliance or most important relationship in the entire world. And how we get along together is going to impact the rest of the world. And so, our two countries cannot let any of this competition veer into conflict. And as I said, that's our responsibility. And over the last 4 years, I think we've proven it's possible to have this relationship.
Meanwhile, President-elect Donald Trump has said that oil and gas industry executive Chris Wright, a staunch defender of fossil fuel use, would be his pick to lead the Department of Energy. And Wright is the founder and CEO of Liberty Energy, an oil field services firm based in Denver. Here's a report. Take a look.
President-elect Donald Trump will tap Brendan Carr as chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. In a statement on Sunday, Trump said Carr was, quote, a warrior for free speech and has fought against the regulatory lawfare that has stifled Americans' freedoms and held back our economy. Carr is currently the top Republican on the FCC, the independent agency that regulates U.S. telecommunications. He is a strong critic of China and has been an advocate of the FCC's hard line on Chinese telecom companies like Huawei. Carr is also a critic of the Biden administration's telecom policies and big tech. Last week, he wrote to tech giants including Apple and Microsoft, saying they had taken steps to censor Americans. Carr said on Sunday the FCC must, quote, restore free speech rights for everyday Americans. Over the weekend, Trump also picked Chris Wright to lead the Department of Energy. Wright is the CEO of an oil field services firm and a staunch defender of fossil fuel use. He is expected to support Trump's plan to maximize oil and gas production and to seek ways to boost electricity output amid a surge in energy demand for the first time in decades. He is also likely to share Trump's opposition to global cooperation on fighting climate change. Wright has called climate change activists alarmist and has likened efforts by Democrats to combat global warming to Soviet-style communism. In a video posted to social media last year, Wright said, quote, there is no climate crisis, and we're not in the midst of an energy transition either. If confirmed by the Senate, Wright will replace Jennifer Granholm, a supporter of electric vehicles and renewable energy sources.
We're providing.
Meanwhile, leaders of the Group of 20, the G20, gathered in Rio de Janeiro today for their annual summit, with discussions expected to be shaped by the shift in global power following Donald Trump's return to the White House. Brazil's President Lula da Silva welcomed leaders to the Modern Art Museum, where talks on trade, climate change and security will unfold amid geopolitical tensions. Prime Minister Modi, US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping are in fact in Rio de Janeiro for the summit that is going to continue until the 19th of this month. And during the first session, leaders are going to be discussing issues related to fighting inequality, social and financial inclusion, international tax cooperation, and food security. Meanwhile, diplomats have struggled to finalize a joint statement, particularly over the ongoing war in Ukraine. Trump's new policies, including tariffs and a focus on negotiations over Ukraine, are expected to disrupt the summit's priorities, such as Brazil's push for taxing the wealthy and reforming global governance. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called on G20 members to use their power of leverage to tackle key global issues such as climate and peace.
And I have come to Rio with a simple message. G20 leaders must lead. And G20 countries, by definition, have tremendous economic clout and they yield massive diplomatic leverage. They must use it to tackle key global problems. Peace in Gaza, with an immediate ceasefire, the immediate release of all hostages, and the beginning of an irreversible process towards a two-state solution. Peace in Lebanon, with a ceasefire and meaningful steps towards implementing Security Council resolutions in full. Peace in Ukraine, by following the UN Charter, UN resolutions, and international law. Peace in Sudan, by leaders leaning on the warring parties to end the horrific violence and desperate humanitarian crisis being unleashed on civilians. Everywhere, peace requires actions grounded in the values of the UN Charter, the rule of law, and the principles of sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity of states.
Well, stories up next from India's own neighborhood, where the Indian Coast Guard on Sunday rescued 7 fishermen who were caught by a Pakistani ship near the India-Pakistan maritime boundary after a chase of over 2 hours. Defense officials have corroborated this statement. Officials claim that despite efforts by the Pakistan Maritime Security Agency and the ship to retreat, the fishermen were successfully rescued and are all in stable medical condition. During the chase, the Indian Coast Guard made it clear that under no conditions would it let the Pakistani ship capture the fishermen from the fishing boat Kal Bhairav from Indian waters. Defense officials further explained, however, Kal Bhairav was damaged and sunk amid the incident. The ICG received a distress call at 3:30 p.m. on Sunday from an Indian boat operating near the no fishing zone, informing them that a fisherman on board were taken captive. Well, moving on, a special tribunal in Bangladesh on Monday directed the investigators probing allegations against ousted PM Sheikh Hasina to complete their work within a month's time. Ghulam Murtuza Majumdar, head of the 3-member International Crimes Tribunal, has set 17 December as the deadline for the investigators to finish their probe. This decision by the tribunal came after prosecutors sought more time for the investigation. Now investigators are looking into allegations of crimes against humanity against Hasina and her close aides after hundreds of people were killed in a mass uprising in the lead-up to Hasina's ouster on the 5th of August. Well, the chief prosecutor of the tribunal has already sought help from Interpol through the country's police chief to arrest Hasina. On the 17th of November, head of the interim government Muhammad Yunus said in an address to the nation that his administration would seek Hasina's extradition from India. But even as Yunus says that his administration will be seeking Hasina's extradition from India, a report by the Risk and Rights Analysis Group titled 100 Days of Yunus, has deplored the Nobel Peace Laureate for virtually replicating every act of the deposed Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, which includes violations of the rights of indigenous people and religious minorities and providing impunity to the murderers of 44 policemen killed during the students' protests. The reports list the following acts of violation under Yunus and his administration: criminal cases against over 2 lakh people, mainly political opponents, in 1,598 cases, targeting of about 354 journalists, including acts of violence against at least 74, criminal cases against at least 113, and cancellation of press accreditation of at least 167 journalists altogether. The establishment of a compliant judiciary by removing the 5 Supreme Court judges, including the Chief Justice, and 12 High Court judges because of the protests of the anti-discrimination student movement. The dissolution of the NHRC by forcing all the members to resign because of the critical monthly report in October, contrary to the interim government's claims on law and order situation. The usage of discredited International War Crimes Tribunal against political opponents by filing more than 80 complaints of crimes against humanity and genocide. And of course, increased attacks on the indigenous peoples in the Chittagong Hill Tracts.
প্রিয় দেশবাসী, শিশু, কিশোর কিশোরী, তরুণ তরুণী, ছাত্রছাত্রী, বয়স্ক, বৃদ্ধ, পুরুষ, মহিলা সবাইকে সালাম জানাচ্ছি। বিপ্লব চলাকালে প্রায় ১,৫০০ ছাত্র শ্রমিক জনতার শহীদী মৃত্যু হয়। আমাদের সরকার প্রতিটি মৃত্যুর তথ্য অত্যন্ত যত্নের সাথে জোগাড় করছে। এই বিপ্লবে আহত হয়েছে ১৯,৯৩১ জন। আহতদের জন্য ঢাকার ১৩টি হাসপাতাল সহ বিভিন্ন বিশেষায়িত হাসপাতালে চিকিৎসার ব্যবস্থা করা হয়েছে। প্রতিদিনই
Meanwhile, farmers across France are up in arms again, protesting a potential trade deal between Europe and the Mercosur bloc. The deal, they say, threatens their livelihoods by opening the door to cheaper imports from South America, where farming practices don't meet Europe's stricter standards. President Macron has already reiterated his opposition to the current Mercosur proposal, calming some protests temporarily. But many farmers aren't backing down, with rallies planned in front of the government offices through mid-December. The frustration isn't new. Earlier this year, farmers protested foreign competition, burdened by low incomes, heavy regulations, and even weather-hit harvests. Now the prospect of more imported beef, chicken, and sugar feels like, as one union leader put it, a bitter cherry on the cake. Shifting our focus to the Philippines, where Super Typhoon Man-yi wreaked havoc in the Philippines over the weekend, claiming at least 8 lives, including a family of 7 buried in a landslide in Nueva Vizcaya. Making landfall in the Catanduanes, the storm triggered landslides and floods before weakening it as it moved across Luzon. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. vowed continued rescue and relief efforts for the isolated areas and the displaced families. The U.S. has pledged $1 million in humanitarian aid, with Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin authorizing direct support for relief operations. Man-yi is now heading towards Vietnam, leaving devastated farmlands and communities in its wake. And with that, we've come to an end to this segment of Top Stories. Lots more continues right on the other side. Keep watching News 9.
Hello. If your money is fraudulently taken by somebody or if a cyber crime takes place with you,
क्या हम कृष्णा दास गुप्ता जी से बात कर रहे हैं?
and you report it to the bank within 3 days of the crime, the bank is liable to pay you 100%. This is clear-cut guidelines.
मैं डिपार्टमेंट से बात कर रहा हूँ.
If you report it within 7 days, the bank is liable to pay you 50%. And if you report it in 21 days, I think 25% or something.
और हमने ये देखा है कि आपके आधार कार्ड से एक सिम रजिस्टर्ड हुआ है यहाँ.
if the person gives information within the span of 3 to 4 hours, 100% recovery can be done. I personally have seen a lot of cases where 100% recovery has been done.
आपका सिम यूज हुआ है, इलीगल एक्टिविटीज हुई हैं उस सिम से. Oh my God, madam, you are also involved in the Naresh Goyal money laundering case.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Hello, what's up everyone? While writing lifestyle articles, I am Shanvi Arora. Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to our show, Love It or List It. That happens to be my vlog as well. I am Shanvi Arora, a lifestyle content writer and a part-time vlogger. While writing for lifestyle articles, my interest on the topic took me to vlogging for the same. So, we are gonna go and explore really fun lifestyle upgrades for you guys. Let's go guys. Mix kar diya.
लोग वायदा करते थे लेकिन निभाते नहीं थे.
प्रधानमंत्री जी के लिए ये संविधान खाली है.
इस बार सब कुछ अच्छा ही होगा, कमल का फूल खिलेगा.
पहला चरण का जो चुनाव हुए, कम से कम 32 सीटें बीजेपी को मिलने वाला है, पक्का हो चुके हैं. आज हमने इनके सामने, बिरसा मुंडा जी के सामने हाथ जोड़े. मैं आपसे पूछना चाहता हूं, क्या बिरसा मुंडा जी की सोच इसमें नहीं है? ये तो फक्त ट्रेलर है, पिक्चर अभी बाकी है.
Exact बोलने. 2 major fashion goals. अरे नहीं यार. Let's dive in. Mix किया सब mix हुआ है. Hey, it's your girl Pranmi back with another episode of Love It and List It, aka your favorite lifestyle vlog. I am Shanvi Arora, a content writer and a part-time vlogger. Today I am taking you through some major ethnic and festive goals. Ready for some sparkle and glam? Let's dive in. Today we're going to explore major ethnic. एक बार वो read करता मैं पूरा exactly बोल देती हूँ.
Hello and welcome to the News 9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News 9 Plus. Here are the top headlines today. The Supreme Court has criticized the Delhi government for delaying the implementation of stringent anti-pollution measures under GRAP 4, even as air quality in the national capital deteriorated. A bench of Justices Abhay S. Oka and Augustine George Massey said no scaling down of these measures will be allowed without the court's